There we are. Positive Echo podcast, episode 6, Gary. How about that?
I cannot believe it. I didn't think we had that much to talk about, but hey.
Clearly we do. Chance conversation with a man in my town has me in this condition of recording the Positive Echo podcast with you, episode 6. And this week, looking at secrecy and keeping secrets, the good, the bad, and the ugly around that topic. What first possessed or influenced you or inspired you to speak of this subject? We had a bit of a freeze.
Actually, we've gone a bit.
Yeah, that was weird. But you're back now. Okay.
There was it's Substack, and there were several posts around confidence, around and we seem to be frozen a bit, but I'll carry on.
I can hear you speaking, even though your pictures are about to catch up with you.
Yeah. Okay, let me just see if it's...
While you're finding your technological optimal scenario, your TOS, your technical optimal scenario.
The reason was
okay, you're back.
People who are asking me about keeping confidences, breaching of confidences, and I'd already chatted to you about the toxicity of secrecy, personal secrecy, and I just thought, well, let's unpick this a bit, because there are good reasons to be secret. There are bad reasons, and there are really ugly reasons for keeping secret, and the toxicity of secrecy. Hopefully, by the end of it, we'll come out with some positives. If not, we'll advance the boil, you know.
Yes. Well, we're putting it on the table, so to speak, and having a chat about it this evening. And in my generalized view, I'm happy to talk about this, and I think it's a really important subject. My generalized view is that we have a generally in the collective conversation of our culture and society, we have a generally toxic relationship to secrecy, or secrecy causes generally toxic results. And whilst there is virtue in secrecy and confidence, that would appear to have been used against us as well.
Yes. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, the reason why people keep secrets is because they cling to the original idea of not hurting people by not saying things. That's definitely a real and honourable thing. There's no question that's a useful thing sometimes for human beings to not say something because the results might be devastating or difficult or dangerous or something like that. But that's been generalized into areas where people just feel uncomfortable or can't face up to things. And so we've ended up with an unholy mess. And when we first started talking about this, I sent you a link to a chap called Brad Blanton, who really espouses and practices the opposite in a way, which is radical honesty. And I think you may have found that interesting, and it's certainly another angle.
Yeah, I really did. Radical honesty. It's an interesting concept, but even he, if I remember correct, watching his, I think it was a TEDx talk, was careful with how honest that his approach is. If honesty is used as a blunt weapon, then it's not done with any love behind it or compassion. It's kind of, well, I'm going to hit you with this and see what the result is. I'll probably feel better about myself, and I don't really care about how you feel. That's being honest.
Yes.
But it's being brutally honest.
Yes.
So there was a movie, wasn't there? About a guy.
Jim Carrey. Was it Jim Carrey?
Yeah, he could only ever say yes, or he could never tell a lie.
Tell a lie. Only saying yes is a different movie.
Yeah. Okay. And when I watched that, I thought, this is a very dangerous game to be brutally honest all the time. In Yorkshire, in the UK, they call it being blunt.
Yeah.
And yeah, they are very blunt.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
it's without malice aforethought.
Yeah.
So if we deal with maybe the good side of honesty, and then we can move to the more, I don't know, the darker side of secrecy.
Can
So,
I just at that
yeah,
point ask you then? That's how we're framing this up. Is
yeah,
that honesty, authenticity, vulnerability, those sorts of qualities of being open and real are like a mirror image, or they're the light side of the dark side that is
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
with withholding, not speaking when you can or should. And
yeah,
that's the kind of context here. Those are the
yeah.
opposites, if you like. All right. Yeah.
Because when I was doing coaching, one of the tools to use was to, and it's done in therapy as well to some extent, is you identify the dark stuff and then you look for the positive opposite.
Mhm.
So if I find no joy in life, how do you provide somebody with a tool, despite themselves, to notice just that tiny, tiny modicum of joy? Oh,
Mm.
we found a positive opposite. So I was thinking that we could use that kind of approach, but we
Yeah.
do it in reverse. We'd look at the good side of secrecy, and the thing we should perhaps do more of, because there is an epidemic of people being brutally honest on social media,
Mhm.
but they do it for entirely selfish reasons,
Yeah.
to offend, to upset, so on. So I mentioned I was a coach, and the first thing you learn at being a coach, whether it's a life coach or an executive coach, as I was, is nothing leaves the room. So it's a form of secrecy.
Mhm.
And you have a contract with your client, which covers all sorts of things like the money and time and dates and so on, and cancellation. But the other thing it says is the coach guarantees not to share any of the contents of sessions or communications with the outside world, with the caveat, the exception, that it reveals some crime or it reveals an intent to harm either the coachee or the coach. And in that situation, all rules are off. So it's a form of secrecy. It's a secret pact, but it has a safety net. When two people are having a conversation in a coffee shop or at home, and one says to the, I've got something to tell you, and I don't want me to tell anybody.
Yeah.
Now, there's two ways that this can go. One is that you've just burdened somebody with some horrible information that they just don't know what to do with. And now they need to be able to share it with somebody to relieve the pressure. Or your listening and then subsequent silence, you don't tell anybody, is a wonderful gift.
Mm.
So the secrecy side, the decision is, do I say to the person who's about to tell me a secret, what do you want me to do with this information?
Yeah.
Because if I feel it's putting anybody in danger or you're slighting somebody, I may not keep that a secret.
Yeah.
Forewarned is forearmed. So keeping things in confidence, it can either be a very positive thing, or actually it can do the listener some real damage. They don't, what do I do with this?
Absolutely.
So sharing secrets is good because they no longer become secrets, but you've now passed the burden of a secret onto someone else. And they have to make the decision, do I honor the contract I've just given to someone, or do I breach it? So then there's the issue around information. We all panic. Companies being hacked and your personal data is on the dark web now. Well, that was supposed to be secret. That was a contract between me and the person holding the data. and they negligently broke our contract of confidence. How does that make me feel? Well, apart from the fact that you might get your identity cloned or your bank account emptied, there's a feeling of emotional robbery that's gone on.
Yeah.
So that's an aspect of secrecy that organizations, I don't really they don't think it through. I know they don't. I've talked to people who control data. They just see it as data. Oh, shit, we've just had a breach. We better report it, because if not, we'll get a massive fine. Once they report it, probably they might get their wrists slapped. So people are handling our secrets willy-nilly, and that really does annoy me.
Right.
Yeah. So have you had a conversation? You don't have to name names, of course, but a conversation recently where somebody has said, I need to tell you something?
Not recently, but I am tickled and tantalized by many of the things you've said. And the first thing that came to mind was, well, how the thread here is this is all work in progress. So the early coaching contracts might not have even had contracts. And when they said, you can tell me anything in here, the next iteration was, because someone might have got hurt, you can tell me anything in here unless it breaks the law, and that needs to be in the contract now. And things like in life, at school, it's probably the first time you're asked, isn't it? The power play of the primary school. When somebody wants to share something with you as weaponized information and swears you to secrecy, it's probably most of our first experiences are like that. And then, I know in recent years, when someone says to me, look, I want to tell you something and you mustn't tell anyone, I generally say to them, I can't promise to do that. And I have a completely open connection as far as information goes with my wife. I can't guarantee I won't tell her. Because we don't keep secrets from each other, and and if it's you or my wife, I'm going to upset with this. It's going to be you, I'm afraid. So I wouldn't have said that in primary school. One, because I wasn't married, but also I didn't know what happened in life, and all of this is work. And it's the same with companies now, isn't it? These companies, they've got their mission statement about data, and they've got the best of intentions, and we can clearly see that doesn't stop terrible things happening with people's data. So it's like we're playing catch up all the time, aren't we? And the feeling of being emotionally abused or betrayed or whatever is something we are going to have to face whenever we commit information to other people, whether it's very personal, emotional stuff, or if it's data and information for company purposes. I think it would be unrealistic to think nothing bad is ever going to happen in those interchanges, but we can grow in how we deal with them and our understanding of them, I think.
Yes. And I'm interested in the people who share a secret, what their response is when someone else breaches that trust.
Yeah.
And do they also keep secrets on behalf of other people? Because I found I don't gossip. Never have. I find no excitement, joy in talking about people who are not in the room.
Yeah.
But I observe gossip and the passion that people put into it to destroy somebody who is not there and they can't defend themselves.
Yes.
So I always said, well, I'll talk about someone, but only if we get them in the room.
Awesome. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. Or I am not prepared to talk about someone who's not in the room. And if you don't like that, let's just stop talking. Talk about something else. Because you never know that when you leave the room, what they're going to say about you.
Well, the chances are that they will. What would be so special about you that they wouldn't do the same to you as what happened with the other person?
So I always brought my daughter up to say, look, if you've got something to say to me, please say it.
Yeah.
I might not like it. That's not the same thing. There's plenty she's told me over the years I don't like.
Yeah.
But at least I know.
Yes.
So it kind of brings us, I think, onto sharing. Because
Before we do, may I come back to another inspiration or percolation based on, because I would like to go back for a moment to radical honesty, because I totally agree with you, and it is generally most people's first instinct is like, the weaponizing and brutality of honesty is not ideal. And I don't think that's what is meant by radical honesty. It's what people hear in it that they think, oh, I could use that for my own benefit and unburden myself without having to do any work or face the consequences. And Brad Blanton is very clear that it's really important to be honest and say what's going on for you and to own it, right? This is how I feel about what's happened between you and I, not I think you're a so-and-so, because that doesn't tend to go very well. But what you just said, I had this effect in me, and sharing that. And it is still likely that other person could be upset. And one of the key messages of radical honesty is sticking around to clear up the mess. And I think in the video I sent you, he says something like, it doesn't usually take more than 90 seconds. Now, the reason we don't do that, I think, is because we do fear the consequences. And that's why people, I think, prefer to gossip and not address the person directly, because of it's usually said it's because I don't want to hurt them, but actually they probably don't want a difficult situation on their hands. Right? They don't want to hurt themselves more than anything. So when radical honesty is done well, it's the most liberating, enlightening tool or method in human communication in many ways. It's absolutely brilliant. I've got a massive respect for non-violent communication, because it shares, it's almost like a soft version of no less impactful, but a slightly softer kind of version, it would appear, than straight up radical honesty. But non-violent communication and radical honesty are beautiful things when they're used in the right way. Like all tools, I guess, when you use something in the right way, including secrets or authenticity, and that's our work, isn't it, to find out what the right way is.
Well, if we look at the concept behind our podcast and my Substack, this idea of leaving a positive echo. So when you're being radically honest with someone, it just means that you give them what you perceive to be the truth.
Yes.
That doesn't have to come, and I don't think should come, with any form of personal judgment. What tends to happen is when somebody says, I'm just being honest. No, they're being judgmental.
Right.
So what is the consequence or the expected outcome of someone telling someone else what they believe to be the truth?
Right. What's your motivation?
And if your motivation is to win over them, there's no compassion involved. It doesn't help the other person. And really, it's not helping you, because you're just becoming bitter and twisted. And it's really hard to get out of that habit. And it becomes an addiction to be brutally frank without being honest.
Accountable, right? Without being
accountable for your opinion.
Yes.
And it isn't just about facts and data. It's,
no, often that makes things worse, doesn't it?
It does, because, and I've said this before, politicians, they already know what the answer is. You can see that every day. They already know what the answer is, so they cherry pick information to prove their point. So in a conversation with someone, the idea for me is, how can I bring both of us to a better place? And that should involve honesty and the very careful use of secrecy. So if, as you said at the beginning, the information I'm going to tell you will actually damage you, why am I doing it? Because I want to damage you. That doesn't make me a very good person.
Right. It's not a positive echo.
No, not at all. If the information I want to pass to you is uncomfortable, I might tell you, you may not like what I'm going to tell you now, but I mean it well.
And
that actually, turns out to be one of the first things that a hostage negotiator will say to the hostage taker. You're not going to like what I'm going to tell you. We can't give you the airplane, but we're prepared to keep talking to you.
Yes.
So when I was trained in how to have high conflict conversations at work, you'd use the same approach. It's you may not like everything I'm going to say because I'm not just going to give in to you. I equally probably won't like everything you're going to say, but there's something in the middle that might work for both of us.
Very interesting, isn't it?
We may withhold information because it doesn't take us both to a better place. That's still secrecy.
I really want to say as well, Gary, that the context in which these conversations, the culture is really important as well, isn't it? So in family life, in corporate life, it's all very well, isn't it, to come back in on Monday morning, having done the high conflict conversation course and lace into somebody. But if it's in a culture where people are worried about losing their job,
very hard
within hours, with no redress, or in a family where someone's going to just do their nut or like get violent, you have to have both, don't you? You don't have to, but I know it works better when you have what you might be called a loving culture, both in family life and corporate life, in which to say those things. And I don't think you can do one without the other. If you have an entirely loving culture, we might not address anything difficult, right? And difficult things obviously happen. And if we have an entirely conflict-based culture where we're radically honest all the time, but without the accountability and the strength of support, that's going to be a traumatic environment to be in, isn't it? So I think you really need both for optimum results.
And I've read a lot around business organization and leadership and so on, and put quite a few of those things into practice.
Right.
And it's clear that measured, carefully, not controlled, but carefully monitored conflict drives change and development better than everybody going, oh, it's really wonderful to be working with you. It's this balancing act between allowing people to disagree, knowing that's okay, and letting the dogs of war go off.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I was always known as the benign subversive. I called myself a benign subversive.
Is that also known as a sneaky bugger?
Well, it's quite a typical neurodivergent thing. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a survival skill.
It's also something we don't really know we do until somebody picks us up on it.
Absolutely.
It's I would be able to look at a very complex system within a medical school and go, those three things are not working perfectly well. And here's some ideas to make them work better. Now, after the 50th time of hearing that, people think I'm just criticizing. I'm always finding ways to criticize. What I'm doing is stress testing the organization.
Yes.
But I'm doing it completely well-intentioned.
Yeah.
Because I want the organization to succeed better than it's doing now. So I would get gradually excluded from things. And at first I thought, why aren't they asking me to go back to that committee? And then it went, best I just for a while.
Very interesting.
So that created a level. That created a level of secrecy in me.
Yes,
I felt I had to hold back.
Yeah,
which was again a little bit destructive, and the reason I left university life in the end.
Really?
Yeah, because I felt the things where I could make the best contribution were being completely ignored.
Yeah.
So I left. Stop hitting your head on the brick wall. It hurts.
And nobody took the time presumably because of the culture, to say, what is your intention here, Gary? Or actually, even though we don't really like this guy, it's like sort of whodunit, isn't it? We don't like this guy's methods, but we like his results, sort of thing. I don't know which detective that was said about,
and
but
and you measured on certain things. As an academic, you measured on how many research papers are published, what journals they're published in, how much money you get to support that research from outside organizations. And that's how you get promoted. And frankly, in the end, I wasn't interested so much in that. I was more interested in helping all the younger people coming through to do their job better, and how the heck can the organization help them achieve more. And in the end, there's another secret I just couldn't tap into. So the secrets around culture, if you don't know how the culture works, that secret, you feel excluded again. And a lot of people feel excluded. And it's not just about being neurodivergent. They just, for some reason, they never quite work out how to make friends at school, how to be in the clique that goes drinking after work. Whether you should do or shouldn't is a different matter. But that's another kind of secret, which is actually quite toxic, because it goes to self-worth. So unless you can express yourself, your full self at work, and not just pull the handle and press the button and turn the knob, you're always thinking, there's more of me. Why aren't you asking for more of me? I could give so much more of me if you only bothered to ask.
Well, I mean, I want to ask you, and I do, I think I'm a benign, what did you call it? Benign disruptor?
Subversive.
Yeah. And the reason I said sneaky bugger is because I think that my benign subversive efforts, I've only been able to channel as being a sneaky bugger. I recognize it. I do recognize it. It's like, well, if I can't get results overtly, I have to express this somehow. And it comes out in a bad way, in the way I think you just described it, or you leave. And then I want to ask you, and everybody who's watching, like, how many organizations could cope with the levels of honesty we're talking about? They're not set up for that, are they? I mean, I think they generally, it sounds to me like you were truly in the business of education, having gone into education. Now, I think we can fairly say that not everybody in education is still squarely in the business of education. Something else happens, doesn't it? On the surface, they're in the business of education, but as soon as self-interest kicks in and their own personal difficulties, you end up with an unholy mess of getting away from the whole point of the endeavor in the first place. I think that's my observation. But like I say, I'm a sneaky bugger, and I've got a very jaundiced, cynical view of these places.
One of the, I'm trying to remember the name of the company. It's a Californian company. Whether it's still in business, I should have checked. It was, maybe still is, the world's biggest producer of processed tomato goods, so ketchups and sauces, and world's biggest, vast company. And it has a completely flat structure.
Right.
There's no hierarchy at all. And people are paid based on the complexity and responsibility of their job.
Yeah.
But they don't have more right than anybody else to go, that isn't working. I've got an idea to improve things. And it's not just suggestion boxes. And people go, that couldn't work.
Right.
Well, it's the biggest company of its kind in the world. Clearly, it does work.
Yes.
And that has to be based on no secrecy.
And a guardian of that culture, I think. Because I think people with really brave ideas like that have to work at them and allow time for them to emerge, don't they?
Yes.
And I've worked. I myself am somebody who sees a good idea and wants to implement it immediately and have immediate results. These things don't work like that, do they? And I've been in organizations where someone's clearly seen a TED talk and says, you know what we should do? And it's like, it doesn't.
We should have radical honesty.
Exactly. And you're a turd or something. There we go. We've started the new culture. It's like, oh my God, we probably need a little bit more contextual work and cultural work here.
And if you're in Bristol, and somebody says, how do I get to London? Is it easy? And they go, yeah, it's really easy, but I wouldn't start from here.
Yes, exactly.
And for most big organizations, the problem is it's like a super tanker.
Yes.
Simply stopping them is impossible.
Yeah.
You can't go, we're going to start something new. You might just be able to steer them over several years in a 5-degree variation to the right or left. But it's immensely difficult. So what tends to happen is the leaders of the organization, they say to each other, yeah, we should have this inclusion and diversity thing going on. We'll put some systems into place and we'll employ some consultants and a policy statement. But they themselves never change their attitude.
Yeah.
So it's all window dressing.
Yeah.
So the secrecy that we're talking about is happening at the top, and they've got to try and keep the fact that they don't believe in this stuff. So they go out and talk about it. But generally speaking, there are a few exceptions. Those people at the top are driven by their shareholders and their board, and they've got the boot of both on the back of their neck. So they only are driven by that.
Yep.
Think of schools. The heads of schools are driven in the UK by the quality of their Ofsted report. Now, it used to be one word, and that had terrible consequences for one individual.
Right. Yes.
Who committed suicide because the school was downgraded and nothing had changed.
On one word. On
one word. And it just destroyed her.
Yeah.
So there must have been a secret there.
Yeah, right.
Why have you downgraded me when the school is doing the same things as well? We know they are.
Yes.
But you've decided that we're not. But you're not telling us why. So when people's minds are presented with that void of a secret, they just start thinking, well, the worst. And I've said this before, when men are in that position, fear drives aggression. They fight back. It's got to be somebody else. Women, on the whole, in my personal experience as a coach, I'm not going to generalize to the entire world's population of women. They've reported to me a feel of guilt and shame. And that's what this headmistress felt. Guilt and shame that she'd let down her staff, let down the parents, and she couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And she told no one.
Yeah.
That's secrecy in its worst form.
Absolutely.
And we really need to, before we finish, is deal with that level of personal secrecy that takes you to the brink. But we're not quite there yet.
No. Can I, while you're finding our next sort of avenue of adventure and investigation, we've had a few comments coming in.
Okay.
Hi, hello, Portugal. I hear I've had that happen to me in Portugal. This is presumably being the receiving end of kept secrets when I was there for 5 weeks, stealing and charging too much. I felt like a human ATM. Well, that's a horrible situation to be in. My mum said, "Tell it to the wall because they don't talk back." That's Catherine. Hi, good evening to you. Thank you for being here. Yeah, if you don't share, I guess you can't risk you don't take the risk of it becoming difficult. But then again, you don't get the benefit of sharing either. And walls have ears, it was said as well, even though they don't seem to talk back in World War II, I believe, in the UK. My issue and experience, says Gina, continuing with the situation she had in Portugal, was those who had a bad reputation, who even talked about other people who disliked them. And sure enough, those were the ones who screwed me over too. You must be very careful who we trust. Yes, those who are ripping people off in Portugal are mostly opportunists. You go after those who are trustworthy, who trust people, if that makes sense. Yes, indeed. Trust is earned, is how Catherine's responding. Be selective, your privacy, your data, and life is critical. Most people say no judgment. However, if they don't agree, judgment follows. It's true. We are emotional, complex beings. It happens. And I think it comes back to this sticking around to clear things up. What else have we got apart from and that accountability. Truth and trust and communication needs to be taught in school. Thank you, Gina. Don't you guys think? Absolutely. I would love being around people who can compromise, communicate, and be trustworthy. And I think that comes back to the super tankers of our culture. You know, how on earth can we teach beautiful insight and skills like this when the organizations themselves have become these super tankers set on particular kinds of values with particular kinds of outcomes and fixations? There's some big structural work to do, I think, before we can get anywhere near that. And it just comes down to the family unit, I think, to provide these things at the moment, I would say.
Remembering that the family unit is many different things.
Yeah, well, I mean, those closest to you. I mean, start small. Start small.
Yeah.
You know, wanting your work culture to change quickly and support you in many workplaces now. That is not what many workplaces are focused on. I don't think. You know, it's not about that. And fair enough. If it's not about that, you're not going to get it there.
Yeah, I think, was it Gina mentioning education? And the idea of teaching kids smart trust. I agree in principle, absolutely, that we don't actually equip our children with how to understand themselves and thereby how to appreciate others. We tell them to share, you know, and do things like that, and make don't snatch that person's sweets away. But we don't help them go, if you're sad, share it with someone you trust. Okay, trust. How do you know when you can trust somebody? Trial and error much of the time.
Yep.
And you have kids who are incredibly trusting. I didn't know anything about, I didn't understand trust because I just said stuff. I'd rattle off the latest thing on dinosaurs that I'd learned. And I would get knocked back. And I didn't learn from that because I was not very astute as a child. I was just excited. I was like little Poppy, you know, I've got this new thing. And I've also got an issue around teaching people things. It makes me want to wag my finger because I know stuff that you don't, and therefore I'm better than you. And my daughter, God bless her, who I've said in the past, she is scarily intelligent. And that would upset her teachers because she'd often know more than they did and could think on the hoof as they're explaining stuff. And she'd be from first principles going, no, that can't work. And they could not handle it. So she learned not to trust adults outside the home because they always dismissed her. Yeah. And so it comes back to what I was saying about educating by show, don't tell. So here's an example of somebody who likes to share stuff. If you don't want to hear it, you just need to say something like this. Yeah. First kid goes, oh, okay. They don't like stories about dinosaurs, but maybe they want something about something else. And eventually you learn exactly how to have a conversation. You don't overwhelm people with information. Equally, the person on the receiving side can stop a conversation without being brutal. Yeah. So it's, how do we show kids how to be more trustworthy? How do we show kids to be compassionate? You can't tell somebody to be compassionate, but kids, although they can be brutal, also seem to have this innate ability to be compassionate, particularly to animals. Okay, use that. So yeah, catch kids young. And then when they're coming into their teens and all of that boiling emotion and hormones, and very often it's either bravura, which is a front for they don't actually think much of themselves, but they've got to prove it something, or they go in internally and really do think they're worth nothing. That's where the secrets are really, really toxic. How do we help our kids be confident enough to share early when they are bewildered by the world.
Yeah.
And we're overwhelming them with so much stuff at the moment. Why wouldn't they be bewildered?
Yeah. May I add something to that?
Yeah, sure.
Along the lines of coming back to parenting, it's a lot. I think a lot of the time with parenting, it's about, whilst we're talking to children, we're actually thinking, how is this for me? And I think a really important question, and that's the parent, like,
Mm.
my kid's embarrassing me, or I don't want them to do that because of how it is for me. And I
Yeah.
think really brave parenting is like asking your kids, how is that for you? And developing that capacity,
Mm.
because otherwise you end up with people who are only taking social cues rather than internal cues. And I think that's something we kill very early on in kids,
Yeah.
that like, how is this for you? On the one hand, because there are things that where kids are in there, how this is for me is really difficult, and my behavior is going to be awkward for the people around me. That definitely happens. There's no question about that.
Mm.
But if we throw that baby out with the bathwater, as it were, poor choice of words, I know, but if we disconnect them from their ability to connect with their inner compass, and very difficult language around this, because it's about emotion, it's about feelings, and we know I think we have an instinctive sort of urge to not have people constantly connected to their feelings, because that can also be wild, and that
Mm.
goes against some sort of norming that's helpful for people. But in doing that, I think we lose touch with the inner capabilities, intuitive abilities that we all have, that can
Mm-hmm.
get taken out of us if we're completely externalized into outer cues and
Yeah.
norming forming outside. And that, I think, it would also be a very useful skill to, I mean, many of us grown-ups have got to learn that for ourselves, so we don't really stand a chance of teaching it to kids. But I don't know how that is for you from a sort of a
Yeah.
neurodivergent point of view. What do you make of that as a sort of way of seeing things, and what I'm suggesting might have been lost?
I, I've got goosebumps at the moment, just
Okay.
recalling things, and
Yeah.
it took me 50 years of my life to understand how important it is to physically feel what
Yes.
I'm thinking,
Yeah.
or the physical readouts of what I'm thinking, because we use this feeling bit as what are we thinking?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's my mood? But that's all intellectual.
Yes.
So what we're doing is bringing up a generation after generation of people who are distanced from their body.
Yes. Absolutely.
They may be measured by how fast they can run or how many goals they can score, but they're not connected with, oh, that particular sinking feeling I have has always told me this. It's in 3 months' time, I know I'm going to burn out.
Yeah.
Maybe you should find something to do differently now.
What, rather than wait the 90 days?
Yeah.
Yes.
So with kids, again, there's some brilliant educators out there that they are wonder of the world teachers, particularly of younger kids, is how we can build into a syllabus the ability to sense how they physically feel.
Yes.
When
Oh,
they're excited, it can be mistaken for anxiety.
yeah.
And often parents misread excitement. If a kid is jumping up and down on the spot, but their face is flat, oh, are you okay? Well, the kid goes, well, that behavior means I'm not okay. I better not do that anymore.
Yep.
Even though that's their way of releasing that inner tension.
Yes. When are we going to get one of these people on our podcast then? These trainers that you speak of, because
I shall find people.
you know
You've now given me a
I love this subject, because
mm,
it's difficult to talk about, because obviously it's like occult and esoteric in our culture.
yeah.
We are very outwardly attuned and taking our cues from outside. So our inner capabilities and intuition probably is one of the best words around this,
Mm.
but that because there are so few words and because those words are so widely not misunderstood, but everyone has a different meaning for them.
Yeah,
I'll say intuition, and then if I said intuition to 20 people, we probably
semantics.
we wouldn't get a
Mm.
unified idea
Yeah.
of that. But we all know what it's like to have a bodily reaction to things. Definitely as kids, and
Yeah,
gradually that I think that is conditioned out of us
it
until
is.
it
Yeah.
returns as some sort of physical ailment.
I mean, if you think about it, I am a fidgeter. I'm doing it as we're talking. You can't see it, but I'm fidgeting. Feet, hands, always.
A lot.
And I'll be playing with stuff on my desk. I even got suspended from school once because I was playing with a ruler. And
It's harsh.
interesting sidebar. My mother and father came to meet Mr. Elliot. He's no longer with us. And it was a good headmaster. It just this one weakness. And we're chatting away in his office, and he said, yes, he's clearly not focusing on the work. And my dad said, well, look at his results. They're pretty decent. And my mum goes, by the way, aren't you playing with your pipe now?
Wow.
So all I was going with that was
Good parenting.
now there are things in for school kids like little treadmills. Remember the old sewing machines where you pressed up and down with your feet like this?
Yeah, they could generate power for the school, couldn't they?
They could. But it means that they've got something physical, particularly the boys love it. And if their body's in motion, they can now focus their attention on things.
And eventually, Gary, we're going to say, aren't we? Like, why are we getting them to do this in the first place? How on earth are we expecting to get good results? Are we getting kids to sit in a bloody same seat for 40-minute blocks?
It's still the same Victorian in Britain.
Yeah.
1850s onwards, when school was obligatory. They wanted to have, well, children didn't know how to behave in schools. They'd never been in these serried rows before. So discipline. It was almost like being in prison to start with. And that has kind of, if you go into most classrooms, they're either in serried horizontal rows or they're in groups. And that doesn't always work for kids either. So can we bring some physicality back into education? Not just in terms of games and, climbing ropes and things. But sitting still for that long is not natural. Why do you think it favors focus? It doesn't.
Can I just check one thing with you? Just another sidebar.
Yeah.
I know we're running out of time now, but Wednesday afternoon is games afternoon, isn't it? Generally
speaking.
Oh,
yeah. In the UK, it's generally.
Yeah, because I was having this conversation with my wife Louisa, and we were driving in our town, and because you've been to San Martino, the kids are so lucky. On a Wednesday afternoon, they are allowed to go and swim and canoe and paddleboard and stuff in the bay. And I was explaining to her that I thought the origins of Wednesday afternoon were because kids had been sat for 2 days until Wednesday lunchtime, 2.5 days. And then the relief valve of games had to be implemented so that they could go back and do another 2 days before the weekend.
Yeah.
It's industrial education, isn't it?
It is. And, I'm not saying I've got the answer. But what I do know is that for many kids who need physicality in their lives, and that is particularly amplified in neurodivergent kids and people, if that's suppressed, we start making things up in our heads to replace that physical movement.
Yes.
And usually those things that you make up in your heads are not good.
No, they're coping.
And then somebody will say, you're daydreaming. Yeah, because I need to escape this crap that I'm sitting in. I can make much better stuff in my own head than you can deliver to me. You're not letting me learn.
Yes.
So as an example, I was actually fairly good at focus, and I found ways of fidgeting under the desk without teachers being able to see me. When I'm presenting things, giving lectures, I've learned to roll my fingers so I can just feel the fingerprints.
Yeah.
And that's just enough stimulus to keep me focused.
Good heavens.
So why not teach that?
Yes.
Why
Yeah.
not let them have fidget spinners and so on in class? Because you'll get better results. Anyhow.
And it's been pathologized, hasn't it? Stimming, these
Yeah.
things are seen as an illness or an ailment or affliction of some sort, and they have to be pathologized. Whereas we could go to the core of it and say, well, are we asking for a reasonable thing here, and is this an understandable response to it? I think you've got a positive echo to share with us before we go that is connected to schools, right? This week.
It is. I don't know whether you're able to bring it up.
I'll bring it onto the screen. I think you've got a kind of grand resolution. I know we've had a few tangents off secrecy, but I think we've covered the gist of it, and we've brought in honesty, authenticity, and vulnerability into this, and modern education, which of course
I was going to say the ultimate secrecy is the secrecy within people's minds who are approaching suicidal intent.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
And if during education we have allowed them to share those feelings, I'm sure that we could reduce the number of people that actually make an attempt. So that's my last word on secrecy.
Well, you make a great point. And of course, it is the ultimate toxic secret, isn't it? Something you can't speak about that leads you to the worst outcome for us human beings. Absolutely.
The number of people go, we didn't know.
Yeah.
They showed no signs of it. Well, what are the signs of somebody being suicidal? Usually, they're all happy and give you the external mask.
You'd never guess.
Anyway, to our positive echo.
Yep. Okay. Go ahead.
I found this on a very nice website, positive news website, not the one that we've mentioned before. And I thought this was really cool. When my daughter left high school, they all signed on each other's white shirts, autograph them, and they got their teachers to autograph them. These kids decided that they would instead write things to bring knife crime to the fore and what they believed kids should do about it. So dozens and dozens of kids ended up with these amazing works of art. And I really recommend people go and find the original thing. They also wrote poetry based on these pieces of art that they produced on shirts.
Very good.
And it's just a moment. It's good in itself, but also the foresight of their educators to encourage it and allow it to happen virtually spontaneously. They just got out the way and let it happen.
Yes.
All of that is a cultural positive echo.
Yes.
And how are these kids going to take this forwards? They will not be carrying knives.
Very, very good. Excellent. Okay, the link for it is there, goodnewspost.co.uk, where you can find other good news, I suspect, as well. Yeah, and you mentioned positive
lots
news.
of good things on there.
A fine.
Some are very small and individual, some are big and organizational.
Something's happening, Gary, with this positive news and positive echoes. A chap turned up in the Bay here, another good egg by the name of Jeremy College. He's a Qigong teacher and practitioner. Saved his life. He used to be a bit of a lad in the city as a trader back in the day, which very nearly killed him, that lifestyle. And he found Qigong, saved his life, is how he describes it. And he started a positive news TV network, or he was going to. And we had some connections with the original Positive News newspaper, Shauna Crockett Burrows, God rest her soul. And here he is, just like you, turning up in my town. It just feels like there's, this is I don't know. Some people might call it karma. People might call it law of attraction. But the conversation, the positive echo conversation, there is an echo happening. We're putting something out there, and then this guy shows up in my town. He's from from the UK. The chances are extraordinary, and I'll have hopefully a positive echo project to share with him to make this town. In fact, you know what? You're an early precedent setter with this, because I'd love to make this town a haven, a healthy haven, you know,
Why not?
and place where people can come out of season to
Yeah.
explore their well-being and their health. Jeremy is on a similar sort of, you know, resonance with this, and something could happen here. And you know, you're part of that journey, and you coming here and talking here in San Martino as well.
Indeed. I mean, we've talked about almost franchising it without the financial side, you know.
Yes.
Creating hubs, self-determining hubs.
Yeah.
There are possibilities for retreats in your town.
Beautiful.
Again, as experiments, some things will work, some things won't. But the ethos behind it is, how can we move the dial? It's the only antidote we have.
Absolutely.
It's the only antidote we have.
Yep. Yeah. What, as in our own effort, insight and efforts and doing something.
Yes.
Yeah.
The small stuff looking after ourselves, the small stuff looking after other people, and that collectively can make a big difference. And with the rubbish that's happening, it's the only antidote.
And perhaps that's a little bit of homework, nothing too onerous. We don't want to bring you back to traumatic memories of school, but you know, between this week until with you again in a fortnight's time, have a think about those small efforts that might have, or small insights and small actions that might have a positive echo and a great impact from here on in. Thanks, Gary. I don't know if you have a last word before I hit the button.
Yes. When our viewers find they have something down, something not good, sit with a piece of paper and write a list of all the rubbish things about it. All the rubbish things, 1 or 2 words. And then on the other side of the paper, have the positive opposites. What would the positive opposite be? It doesn't matter if it's not actually there yet, but it gives you a target to work towards. And then you pick the easiest ones to deal with first and gradually build to the hardest ones. Positive opposites. That's it. That's the homework for the week.
What a lovely thing to leave hanging there. Until we meet again. Thank you, Gary.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching.
Bye, everyone.